the United States and the European more specifically. It's a part A to a two-part series. Tomorrow we'll be dealing with the effects of this history of injustice on its black population. And so today, as I said, we want to look at the developmental morality, I guess you could say, of the European in America, and essentially what effects it has had on society. So my thought in developing this entire presentation followed as I often hear black people say things like, in terms of injustice, why don't they like us? Or, this is America. You know, this is supposed to be the land of the free, and things like that. And it shows a fundamental ignorance of the history of America. This shock when things happen, that people are like, oh, I can't believe they did that. It shows a fundamental ignorance of what has happened. And so I think in this presentation, I would like to preface by saying I am not looking to answer any questions. This is not a solution, per se, a solution-oriented presentation. I think first, in order to get any sort of solution, we have to properly understand the problem. And and as long as we don't understand the problem, or we sugarcoat the problem, we can never find a sufficient answer to the problem. So part B tomorrow, we'll be dealing with the effects of this problem, and then it will be during the the solution confab tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. in the PMC Youth Chapel. And so here's the little ad for that. So that's where part B will be. Doors open at 10 a.m., 10:30 a.m. So once again, what we're doing is sort of like a counseling session. We can all look out into America and see the symptoms of some issues in America. People getting shot, mass incarceration. There are obvious symptoms. What we're coming here to do today is to review the story as you would in a counseling session. And then once we properly understood the story, then we can review the symptoms and maybe we can find a solution to the problem. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. And in my analysis of the situation, I think you have to start at the point of war. You have to go back to the first Europeans to come to Africa. You have to see the entire issue from a standpoint of war. That they came to the borders with weapons and things of this nature and a navy, and they invaded into the inland from the coast, and they would steal peoples, and they would have people steal people. It was an act of war. And I think that's something that's quite obvious, but I think it's something that we often overlook. And so then it will follow that since it was an act of war, then we are obviously prisoners of war. I think that it's an essential, part of liberating the consciousness to start your understanding with the fact that you are not an immigrant, you are not a settler, you are a prisoner of war. Don't they look like prisoners? Okay, so we'll keep it going. And so, doing some research, John Hickman, 2009, he talked about the morally illegitimate purposes for capture and detainment. He said these purposes were punishment, labor exploitation for increased profit, recruitment or conscription as combatant soldiers, exploitation for intelligence, display as proof of victory, and ideological indoctrination. That's something we're going to be dealing with tomorrow, ideological indoctrination. He goes on to say that neither elites nor masses within the society whose state holds them captives and continuing custody typically view them as part of the moral community. Continuing custody does not alter the perceived status of captives as outlanders or barbarians who cannot be intuitively invested without expectations of reciprocity. What they're saying is, right here, is that they cannot be expected or given full access to society without reciprocating what we've done to them. They're afraid revenge is going to come. So we cannot let them fully into society, or they may at some point repay us what we gave to them, or what we took from them. The fact of captivity is a powerful barrier to learning about captives and including them within the moral community. When we know little of others, we have scant evidence to help us to decide definitively what our attitude, beliefs, and suspicions about them really are. because it is far easier to be self-deceived about distant than about domestic injustice. Unjust persons persuade themselves with little psychic cost that brutality and dishonesty are proper and prudent. So, some things that we have to consider, some considerations are, from Hickman, captives are not viewed as part of society. Prolonged, excuse the typo, residency has little effect on perception of captives. There is an expectation of revenge. The captive persuades themselves of the morality of captivity. The detainment is economic in nature. So we have here, when you have prisoners of war, then you necessarily need guards. So then we're looking at social justice, we then trace back the history of police directly to slave patrols. Understand, there are no such thing as police. No such thing, no such invention as police until there are slaves in America. You have it happening in England or what have you, but policing, and even then in England, it was more night patrols. Individuals who didn't want to sign up for the army will volunteer to just stand the midnight watch, just kind of make sure nothing happened, kind of falling asleep on the wall. But the origination of policing in America is directly due to the wrangling of slaves. As you see here, we have the badge, Plantation Police, Runaway Slave Patrol, 1858. And we have Kepler saying, 2011, saying, the institution of slavery and the control of minorities, however, were two of the more formidable historic features of American society, shaping early policing. Slave patrols and night watches, which later became modern police departments, were both designed to control the behaviors of minorities. For example, New England settlers appointed Indian constables to police Native Americans. The St. Louis Police, the who? St. Louis Police were founded to protect residents from Native Americans in that frontier city. And many southern police departments began as slave patrols. In 1704, the colony of Carolina developed the nation's first slave patrol. Slave patrols helped to maintain the economic order and to assist the wealthy landowners in recovering and punishing slaves who essentially were considered property.
Mercy.
And so, with this control, it is not just as simple as wrangling these people together. It is much easier that if you can control their mind, you can then control their actions. So we were considered chattel slavery, like a cow, like a pig, like a chicken. And so we have been domesticated. And Merriam-Webster says that the definition of domestication is to tame an animal, especially by generations of breeding, to live in close association with human beings as a pet or work animal, and usually creating a dependency so that the animal loses its ability to live in the wild.
Mercy, Lord.
We're going to deal with the thing today. Out of domestication, hear me now, we're talking about the evolution of policing and the morality of the European. Feral species descend from domesticated animals. Multiply quickly, disturb community, disturb ecosystem. What is a feral species? A feral species is, I have taken the wolf and I have domesticated him. I have made him my pet. His purpose is my pleasure, period. Or to herd my sheep, one of the two. What happens is then someone gets rid of a dog, another person gets rid of a dog, another person gets rid of a dog, and now you have a community of dogs that have no purpose. They have been freed without any intent for their future, and they multiply quickly, and they disturb the community, and they disturb the ecosystem. They're taking all our jobs. You know, they don't belong here. Disturbing the ecosystem.